Owen hiding in the background. He's going to try to keep hiding, but we'll call him out.
Sorry, man. I'm driving in the car. Hi, everyone.
Sorry, everybody. I started the recording a little bit after all the roll call there, but again, just let you know that in theory we should have this video on our YouTube site in the future.
Okay. Any other introductions? If not, we'll begin with our standing agenda item. Frank or Dave, would either of you have anything you want to share with the group?
I do.
Okay.
Real quick, I was going to say that most of you probably saw an email from me yesterday with links to the duck stamp contest. That'll be live tomorrow and Friday. I think they start at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And links with the entries. So those are things of interest that you can share with whomever. Not official, but Ken indicates that we're likely to have 1 day virtual SRC, probably October the 15th. Again, not 100% sure, but that's most likely. I know, Oren, that relates to an item that you have later on the agenda. And the other thing, and this is especially for Adam, but for everybody's attention, is that we've had internal discussions. I understand that Ken is likely to raise the topic of the release of reports and memos date starting next year being pushed back, given capacity and just how much of an issue it is for staff to meet the deadline for everything currently. That would affect having a meeting. So if that date gets pushed to early September, which is what I think is likely to happen, we probably don't want to meet before that second or third full week of September in the future. And I don't know if Adam's signed any contracts or narrowed that down, but that information is, I guess, preliminary, but I wanted to get it on your radar. That's it.
Okay. Any discussion or questions for Dave?
Is council aware of that, Dave? Because they're right now supposed to be considering a bylaws change.
I'm not aware yet because I just became aware. I will bring it to Brad's attention, but I just found out, so I'm sharing with you guys. Okay. And it's not finalized or official yet, but I want to at least put it on Brad's radar. So, Adam, feel free to do that, but I will send him a note today.
Okay. Yeah, we haven't signed anything because we were waiting for the bylaws to get changed for the date. So.
Yeah, and I made them aware that I'm sure it applies to all the flyways for planning for next year, that if we're going to make a change, we need to communicate early and often with the flyways as they plan for their meetings.
Will there be any opportunity for discussion with stakeholders, e.g. flyways, on the timing of that date, Dave? Or is this
Yeah, I suspect what will happen, Oren, is it'll be a discussion item at the SRC, and the consultants will have opportunity to express, their views on that item.
Well, thanks for letting us know, Dave.
Yep.
Hey, can I guess ask everybody? Yeah, I feel like dropping this less than a year from the meeting is pretty. I mean, I guess in this case we're fortunate Adam hasn't made plans yet, but it would, I guess in the future it'd be nice if you could let us know, start talking about now for 26 or for the 26 meeting or whatever. This feels like very last second that we're going to have, that SRC is not going to even discuss it till October, and then whatever. It just feels like, man, that's pushing us late. Having put on these meetings and hosted these meetings, that's not a very cool thing.
I get it, JB, and I'm sure that Ken will stress how much staff at BADS have been put under the gun to get things done and how difficult it's been. And in the past, there was a September 1 date, and it's just given how much capacity we've lost, it's just too much to ask. And there were a number of factors this year, including late access to like BBS data, some of the state data. There were a number of factors, but I get it. I have expressed exactly what you said to Ken, that we need to communicate this early, and we had this call today, so I'm giving you as early a heads up as I possibly can, and we'll go from there.
I get it, and I understand all those things, but I sort of feel like as states, we keep walking backwards and get our time frames get shorter, and it doesn't really help things. I mean, the timeline used to be July, whatever, 15th to have these reports done. Now it's September 15th, and then it's October 15th, and I don't know. It just it makes me nervous.
I get it.
Any further discussion or questions for Dave?
This is Pam. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think one of the issues was that, yeah, we're not getting the data so if we were getting the data like July 1st, like we used to, I guess then it wouldn't be as big of a deal, maybe. But what has happened is it's like as our deadline got pushed back, people just various things, and I'm not putting a finger at anybody in particular, but like various data sources we get, I think you're getting stuff like, I don't know, a couple of days before like the actual absolute deadline for a bunch of stuff. And I'm not as sure about the AHM report, but yeah, there was a lot of stuff that came down on a lot of people like last minute this year. And so our goal is to like give us an actual window of stuff time where we can actually do up to things, and not have like a September date be like an excuse for people to give us data and other information even later.
I thank you, Pam, and again, nobody has more respect and love for you than I do. I just worry the September 15th deadline then becomes, okay, we've got a little bit longer to get that data to you, and that, it never seems to, every time we push a deadline back, it just continues to stay. We continue to have the same problems. It's just, and we're bumping it back again later. But anyway, it's my main concern in the beginning was not that we're bumping it back, but that within this year we're bumping it back. That's a major thing that should give us the time.
Yeah, it's a communication thing, JB, and I have raised that as soon as it was brought up. But I will state that there's not a specific date. I think it would be early September, might be a couple weeks after where we currently are. But it's a needed buffer. But that's up to Ken to communicate that officially for them to make a decision and discuss it as soon as they can. He's been advised that would be a good thing, but I wanted you guys to know. I knew that Adam was probably working on Brad's behalf for our Mississippi Flyway, and I wanted to make sure that they were aware of that, depending on where they were with their negotiations.
And originally, when we went to those dates, there are reasons for it, not just because we wanted to meet in August, but you run into AFWA's coming up, I guess, beginning this weekend, and I mean, just we potentially lose if you have it back to back with AFWA or whatever. We lose getting counsel there, so that was part of why we were trying to do it early.
Any further discussion? Dave, I have a question on a separate topic. In August, you mentioned the deadline for zones and splits selections from states would be in August. Will that be finalized at the upcoming SRC meeting?
I believe it'll either be finalized there or in the document that comes out. I think they're working on preliminary, so the proposed document would have finalized dates. as long as it would also carry those details that they adopt. So yeah, you'll have that. And as soon as I know it, I'll let you guys know.
Okay. It's important for our timing of the administrative process on our end. Any last questions for Dave? Okay, thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Frank, do you have anything you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, sure. Just wanted to draw folks' attention to the fact that there's some inconsistencies between the federal migratory birds regulations and the provincial regulations in Manitoba this year. So there was a few errors that were made when I think it happened when the province changed their game bird license type. And they were, I think, my understanding is they were made by like communications folks. And so they kind of they carried over. One change actually exists in the regulation, and then the other changes exist just in the summaries and their hunting guides. So, but the fact of the matter is the federal regulations prevail, and so the inconsistencies are in the non-resident dark goose bag limit, which is 5 in federal regulation. It appears as 8 in provincial regulation, but that's an error. That's what's in the guide. So there's efforts ongoing right now. I don't know if Jillian, wants to speak to this, but there's communication efforts that the province is going to undertake to contact folks that have licenses. And then there's also a banner going to be going on the federal migratory bird summary for Manitoba, which draws attention to the fact that the bag limit's actually 5 for dark geese. There's another error for cranes. So the Manitoba guide says it's 8, but the regulation's 5, both provincially and federally. And then there's also a mistake on the date of which afternoon hunting ends, and then also a season opening date for light geese, which is, so there's if you want me to summarize those, I can, in an email so that they're clear. But you should be hearing, anyone that has licenses should be hearing from the province soon. And then the changes will be flagged in the federal summary, which is available online. So, and then enforcement's, well aware of this. They're dealing with the provincial enforcement about how they're going to deal with this in the field and, discretion in the field. But just wanted to raise that in case anybody was traveling up or if questions came up south of the border.
Okay. Thanks, Frank. Any questions for Frank? All right. Hearing none, let's move on to our third agenda item. Mike Brazier with DU is going to give us a summary of duck DNA. Take it over, Mike.
Thank you, Oren. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to join you all today. I'll try to make this quick. I don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to visit a couple of websites, assuming I'll be able to share my screen here in a minute. But this, I guess, opportunity to speak with you all about this came about as a result of an email I sent earlier this year inquiring about potential multi-state grant interest in sort of furthering this duck DNA project. And I think it's in response to that, Oren reached out, and maybe JB as well, and wanted to know if I'd sort of welcome the opportunity to tell y'all a little bit more about it. We don't have any plans at the moment to, maybe whenever I sent that, it was like the multi-state grant deadline was rapidly approaching. We didn't do anything with it at that point. Whether we do next year, I think remains to be seen. But let me just kind of start by, I guess, recalling that maybe last month or the month prior, y'all heard from Dr. Phil Agretsky, sort of the other co-conspirator on this project, about a lot of the genetics work that he's doing and his colleagues have been doing. A lot of it centered around the issue of game farm mallard genetics. We began to, I guess, get engaged with Phil around this particular project a number of years ago as a result of my involvement on the podcast, where we started talking with him and floated around these ideas of, well, this would be kind of cool if we could engage waterfowl hunters in either just sort of from a Ducks Unlimited branding standpoint, using what Phil does to help people identify the ancestry of hybrids that they shoot, sort of a cool factor. And so that's from a engagement and Ducks Unlimited brand awareness thing that we initially thought about this. But then Phil was like, well, wait a minute, there's actually an opportunity to engage waterfowl hunters in collecting this data for much larger purposes, far-reaching purposes from a scientific perspective. And so we began working on this idea probably about 2.5 years ago. And last fall, we rolled out this project. We still consider it in pilot phase. And I suspect most of y'all are somewhat familiar with this, but we have essentially what we're doing is selecting participants from hunters that apply to be part of this project. Those participants last year were given an opportunity to submit tissue samples from 5 harvested ducks. This year, we're scaling that back to 3 samples, 3 harvested ducks per participant, yet we're increasing the number of participants. So one of the changes that's forthcoming. We leveraged a lot of the resources that we have within Ducks Unlimited to make people aware of this, to build a website that talks about the project from all different angles, advocating that it is more than just for entertainment purposes. There is an opportunity to contribute substantially to a genetic database for waterfowl, and at a scale and level that most other taxonomic group researchers would love to have. And so we several of us figured that waterfowl hunters would be very intrigued by this idea. We were right. We had capacity last year to enroll 300 participants. We ended up getting over 4,000 people apply for the project. And I won't go through all the logistics and results of what we discovered, but what I'll do, I think, at this point is see if I can share my screen and go to how do I do that? Oh, wait, I gotta move something out of the way here. Oh, here we go. There. Okay, y'all seeing that? Okay, so this is the website that we built where people can go to learn more about it. Again, we're trying to educate while engaging folks in the research. And one thing I want to clarify to this group is that any of the research questions that are out there, whether they be specific to game farm mallards, whether they be related to any of the morphological or behavioral differences between birds of certain ancestry, Ducks Unlimited is not necessarily defining those research questions. What we're wanting to do is provide a service, sort of a facilitation service between researchers and hunters for a couple of reasons. One is to actually provide the data the way hunters have done for decades as it relates to things that could help waterfowl managers. But then also just to get waterfowl hunters sort of excited about some of the new science, and they contribute data for potentially other questions that could be of interest to managers or academics. So we wanted to make this as user-friendly as possible. The first thing that people would have to do is they'd go to the website and hit apply, and you enter your name, email, and then the state in which you hunt. The state in which people hunt was important to us because we needed that in order to sort of to ensure a sample across the entire U.S. We're not collecting any samples from Alaska or Canada at this time due to some shipping issues and differential costs there. But what the thing that we did is we went through fall of last year and we're continuing it this year is we're selecting participants sort of incrementally. Early on, we're focusing on hunters that will be hunting primarily in some of the northern latitude states. Right now, we're not selecting any hunters from southern states because their season is not open yet and won't be open for a couple of months in some cases. So those folks will be selected later on. So that's some of the information that we collected there. We tried to build out some understanding of why this is important, instructions on how it works, and frequently asked questions, instructions, et cetera, et cetera. We're still going to be building out more of this. Then what happens when a person gets selected is that they go online, create an account. We send them an email, they create an account, then we ship them a kit. I don't have a photo of the kit right now, but it contains all the materials that they would need, including return postage. Sort of like a 23andMe. You get the kit, you collect the sample, and then you return it for analysis. Each participant has their own sort of dashboard where they submit their sort of ancillary data associated with each sample. You go to submit your new sample. And there's just some dialogue here. It talks about optimization for mobile devices or whatever. But when you collect your samples, you're stepped through a number of questions that in theory could be used to inform future scientific analyses related to some genetic signatures, whether we're talking about habitats in which they were harvested, where they were harvested, when they were harvested, things of that nature. One of the sort of incentives and rewards that we provide to participants is for each of these birds that they submit, we have this certificate of pedigree, as we call it, and it tells, the date that it was harvested, the species, the ancestry result. There's also the maternal lineage in here. This bird right here happens to be the first mallard that this kid ever harvested, Reed Pitt. He's, I think, 9 or 10 years old. His father works here in the building. So this is his first duck, and he has a genetic analysis for it. So there's some cool factors associated with some of this. Here's an example of a bird that I shot in early December of last year. It turned out to have some game farm genetics in it. So those types of things that we're building into this. You go back, if you want to talk about the results, we have this little page where we display the distribution of samples received, breakdown by flyway. I think we received somewhere in the neighborhood of 721, it looks like, samples. The kits were in some cases mailed out a little bit late last year, which prevented us from filling the 1,500 theoretical samples that we could have. So we're hoping to do better on that this year. A few notable findings in here, a number of hybrid combinations that were detected. We did allow for people, if they shot a hybrid, to contact us. We'd send them a single vial, and then they could submit that tissue sample, and then we'll send them the results of that. This is some of the things that people wanted us to display. It's like, well, what are you finding? And we try to go out of our way to say, look, this isn't necessarily a random sample. You can't draw conclusions about this. We didn't want to break this down by flyway or anything of that nature. So we're having to kind of walk that line a little bit to make it appealing, but yet not enable people to draw conclusions beyond what is scientifically defensible. The thing that we've launched this year is this, and sorry you have to kind of look at this guy here, but we do have a social media account for this now. We think that's going to give us an additional way to communicate with some of the people that are participating in this, and kind of streamline some things. It gives us another opportunity to educate, make people aware of this project, and also just the value of scientific work that we all as waterfowl managers are involved in. Anything that we at Ducks Unlimited can do to promote the great work that all of our partners are doing, I think is a good thing. And getting waterfowl hunters engaged more in our scientific activities and management decisions, I think is worthwhile. We're also careful to make people to make it known that from a here we go. From a Ducks Unlimited perspective, we're not trying to wade into the game farm release issue. We're facilitating the collection of that data that Phil and other researchers would analyze, and then state agency and federal agency folks could use as is appropriate or as they see fit for any type of decisions that may arise. So that's kind of where we are with it. We're continuing it this year. We're trying to enroll 700 participants, each given the opportunity to collect 3 tissue samples. And it's free to hunters. We're covering the cost of it through major gift donations that our directors of development are securing. And what this looks like going forward, we really don't know. A lot of it is going to depend on our ability to continue raising funds for it. We've had a lot of people offer to pay to participate, but we've said no on that thus far because that gets a little tricky as a nonprofit, whenever it's sort of a fee for service type of thing. And so that's where we are. I don't want to take up any more time on that presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have. I'm not making a pitch for support or anything at this time because we don't really know what we're going to do with it next year. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mike?
Hey, Mike, Seth Maddox. If you're only able to take about 10% of the applicants, how are you vetting or selecting these applicants that you're actually chosen to participate in the program?
It's just totally random. Well, I say it's a random, it's a stratified random sample. We're not necessarily vetting them to assess whether we're going to be getting samples from them or the samples would be credible or would be reliable. The kit and everything else, I think, well, I guess if you account for our time and all that stuff, it gets pretty, you get some cost in there. But from a kind of physical material standpoint, the vials, the buffer solution, the box itself, that's all pretty cheap, so there is no vetting, I guess, in terms of the integrity of the people that are applying and that we're enrolling. But I can tell you that just sort of based on the interactions that we've had with people, we have a participant support line. We have an email address that they can contact. We had a focus group, sort of invitation to participate in a focus group this past year. There was great response to that. The people that we seem to be attracting are really, really interested in this. We have people unsolicited giving us their CV or their resume that I do this, I work for the state agency, I've worked in a genetics lab, I do this, I'm a duck hunter, I'd love to participate, thanks for doing this. And the response has been remarkable. And so I think what we're getting for the most part are the people that are really engaged with waterfowl management and the science that goes behind it. So we haven't had any issues thus far. We haven't had somebody submit something that ends up identifying as a pigeon or something, something like that. We haven't had anybody try to trick us.
Mike, you mentioned you're stratifying. What's the stratification look like?
It's by state. I think this year we're trying to enroll at least 9 participants per state. And that would put us at 450. And then I think the other 250 would be randomly drawn from all the applicants. And again, that temporal phasing of the selections allowing us to focus on hunters in northern states first, hunters in southern states last. We realized pretty quickly we were going to have to account for that. It doesn't make any sense to be selecting North Dakota hunters in December, right? So.
Are there certain species that you prioritize or encourage, or is it entirely up to the hunter?
No, that's a great question. I forgot to mention that. We are prioritizing mallards, mallard-like ducks. So mottled ducks, black ducks, Mexican ducks, and then any hybrid or physically unique or any other bird with a sort of unique physical appearance. I think last year we did specifically request some samples from ringneck ducks and maybe black-bellied whistling ducks because Phil needed to build out his database of sort of genetic reference samples. But I don't think we anticipate that this year.
Fascinating project. Questions, discussion for Mike? Anybody else?
Yeah, I got a question, Mike Zolzak. This is kind of initiated due to interest in hybrids. Are hunters submitting like the first 3 ducks they kill, or just birds that look, particularly hybrid-like?
Yeah, we've talked about that. We're not providing guidance on that, and it's a tricky thing because, like with that graph that I showed, the percentage of samples received that have game farm genetics in them, is that really a random sample, or are they submitting birds selectively based on some unique physical attribute, like maybe the bill has a black spot on it or something of that nature? Maybe, I don't know, some feather characteristic that looks a little bit unusual. We've talked about that. And if there's, we even talked about this year, sort of selecting, adding buttons that the way you kind of do with the way eBird does, where it says, are you submitting a complete list of all birds detected during this trip, whatever. We don't want to discourage, I mean, ideally it's random, right? But we know that's not entirely true, but we can't exclude birds that people are submitting because they have some unique physical appearance. So there's not a good way to get at that, Jason, to ensure that it's a truly random sample. I think our logic, the most recent time we discussed it, is that if you collect enough samples over a long enough time frame from a large enough geography, eventually any of that bias would be reduced. Most of the people that we've talked with said they're submitting the first 3, or they just submit them at random, outside of the hybrids. And so then the hybrids that people contact us specifically for a kit for. But yeah, great question.
Any further discussion or questions for Mike? Well, I think this is super interesting, Mike. I hope you'll keep us updated as this continues to develop.
Yeah. The biggest take home for me, Oren, is just, it's been very rewarding to see the engagement and excitement by people contacting us, thanking us for doing this. Love the project, yada, yada, you know, so that's pretty cool. And I think it surprised a lot of the people that we have in the organization that are a little bit new to waterfowl hunting. And so, yeah, it's just a testament to the interest and investment of waterfowl hunters and a lot of the work that y'all do and others do. So thanks for the opportunity to talk with y'all about it. And y'all know where to find me if you have questions.
It's another great example of citizen scientists and waterfowl hunters.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. That was great. All right. Next on the agenda is an update from Dr. Avers. Barb, would you please take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Oren. So this is, if you guys recall, at our meeting in August during the Human Dimensions Committee, this was one of the agenda items that we didn't get to because we had a good, robust conversation on our hunter engagement. So I just wanted to give everybody that update on the Human Dimensions Working Group Public Engagement Team. So I'm going to go ahead and just share that presentation. Okay, does that look all right?
Looks good.
Okay, good. Okay, that was just we did have our HD Pet had a meeting in Traverse City, Michigan this summer. So that was the obligatory group photo. The first thing that I wanted to cover was just kind of give you guys an update on this flyway social science integration and needs. So this is thinking back to our winter meeting, again, during the Human Dimensions Committee, where, you know, we did the working session with all the flip charts and kind of really trying to hone in on what some of those needs are across the flyway. But this did extend beyond Mississippi Flyway. So this was an effort, you know, with the HD Pet. We really just wanted to try to better understand, kind of similar to an effort we did with the joint ventures, but like how flyways view social science, what those needs are, and then using that input to try to inform our HD Pet work plan priorities. So the way that that I did this, of course, we already know about the Mississippi Flyway working session that we did in February. But for the other flyways, I solicited input through email. And I sent that to Flyway Tech Section chairs as well as Human Dimension Committee chairs if the Flyway had them. Unfortunately, I didn't get a response back from the Central Flyway, but I did get responses back from Atlantic and Pacific. So just, really quickly here, and I do, if anybody's interested, I've written this up into at least, all of the raw data kind of compiled. I tried to just come up with some themes across all of the flyways, but if you are particularly interested, especially in Mississippi Flyway data, just let me know and I can share that document with you. But some of those themes across the 3 flyways, so again, this is Atlantic, Mississippi, and Pacific. In general, overall, the flyways are supporting human dimensions research, and the incorporation of social science into human dimensions research is really variable across the flyways. Not that that should surprise everyone. The Atlantic Flyway seemed to be more coordinated in their efforts to collect HD data, to use HD information. And then if you guys will recall, like one of the things that I think came out really loudly in the Mississippi Flyway was like individual state agencies really are doing quite a bit to conduct some of that human dimensions, not necessarily research, but at least information collection. And then that integration is happening more at a state level than really, maybe at the flyway level. It seemed like all 3 flyways shared this concern about relevancy and the issues with the reduced capacity and budgets of the Fish and Wildlife Service to continue monitoring programs. So that was kind of an interesting piece here that came up across all 3 flyways under, even like human dimensions and social science needs. And the flyways generally have incorporated the survey data from the National Duck Hunter Survey, but there's still an awful lot of question about if HD is actually getting integrated or if it's just kind of more of part of the discussion now. So more of like an informal part of the decision-making process. So is that just kind of helping to influence our thinking and some of those policies? Some more themes. 2 of the flyways thought that the HD PET should expand our focus areas. So if you recall, the HD PET's current focus areas are waterfowl hunters. So it's like waterfowl hunter R3, bird watchers, and landowners. So there was a question when you guys did the breakout there with the flip charts, should we be thinking about other focus areas? So some of the things that came up there were other non-consumptive users, the general public, educators, and then also Indigenous people. I think it was across all flyways, this idea of survey fatigue came up, and we hear it, quite frequently now, is that yeah, it's a real thing, survey fatigue, and that, our hunters, our constituents are just getting too many surveys, and we know that response rates are going down. So just kind of this need for some alternative methods. There was a lack of information about HD PET and what's been accomplished. So this, in the HD committee, Andy always provided an HD PET update. I will continue to do that. The other flyway representatives from HD PET will also give updates at their flyway meetings. So we'll hope to address that. Both the Mississippi Flyway and the Atlantic Flyway are, and I don't know exactly how this fits in with like social science, but it did come up that they're trying to do a much better job of integrating the game and non-game technical sections together. So I thought that one was interesting as well. It came up in the Atlantic Flyway too. And then just really this overall general need and for some guidance on how to use human dimension information. So like, what are the goals? What are those strategies that people can use? And then I just threw together, like, here's just some examples of social science information that the Flyway said would be useful. There was an annual human dimensions research summary, communication and marketing strategies, some like guidance on how to keep flyways relevant, both politically and publicly, some guidance on incorporating social science into decisions. So kind of this idea of a toolkit. This one came up, I know, in our flyway, getting qualified candidates for positions and understanding some of those baseline demographics for practitioners in our field. So this one relates directly to the NAWPEP effort. Information to understand stakeholders and what those geographic and cultural variations might be. And, this came up in our meeting this summer too, is like how to weigh those opinions from different stakeholders. And then what are some of those barriers to landowner participation in conservation programs? So that's kind of thinking like CREP, like CRP. So here's some more examples. Actually, this one's more of like a question, not an example, but have R3 efforts been successful? So it's kind of this idea, like, what have we learned so far with waterfowl hunting R3? Are there more things that we should be thinking about and integrating there? Information and guidance on multi-use recreation. So how to successfully have hunters and non-hunters on the same landscape together. A human dimension strategic plan for flyways came up. Best practices for involving stakeholders in decision making. I think that was, that really fit into our discussion in August. The idea of having a social scientist attend the flyway meetings, or like having somebody dedicated like that on the flyway technical sections. There was this idea that for states that don't have human dimensions staff, that the HD Pet could provide some service there, some consultation, or at least, connect those agencies with a social scientist that could help them. And then again, this idea of how can we deal with survey fatigue. And now it is not advancing. Okay, it is not advancing here. Did it advance on, can you see it, Doran?
On my stream, it went back to one of your initial slides that has a shotgun with a camo, somebody in a camo jacket.
Okay. Yeah, the next thing that I wanted to just update you guys on is in the NAWAMP update, there were a number of people recommendations and that especially related to the HD Pet. So I just wanted to quickly go over these in case you guys hadn't seen that update, or just hadn't paid that much attention to the people recommendations within there. So again, this has to do with goal 3, and this is in the most recent update, which I think is nearly approved and signed. And I've just kind of highlighted some of the most important things here. So the plan committee, the NAWAMP plan committee, looking at the engagement of people as both fundamental and means objectives. And this is kind of a change, and it's been a kind of a consideration and argument, I think, for years. Do we incorporate people to achieve something else, or are those people objectives kind of fundamental objectives on their own? And that also in this piece here, that JVs should be explicitly articulating objectives for people within their implementation plans. Some of these other recommendations here, that the plan committee wanted to appoint the HD Pet to develop a strategic plan that would guide human dimensions efforts related to the NAWAMP work. So obviously that one has a direct implication to HD Pet. And then the other one there is just a recommendation that's directly related to the quantification of ecosystem service benefits that people get from waterfowl and wetland management. So that was another kind of key piece of this update, was this in the framing of multiple benefits, and really this idea of looking at what some of those ecosystem service benefits are to the work that we're already doing. And NAWPEP was also one of the people recommendations, was to continue that. And the last one there was just seeking this wider engagement, encouraging JVs and all of the NAWAMP partners to seek that wider engagement in NAWAMP that better reflects the communities in which it operates. So I just wanted to share those with the group. And then really quickly on our HD Pet work plan. So as I mentioned, we met this summer up in Traverse City. And the idea that this was, you know, an in-person meeting, we hadn't had one in over a year. One of the ideas was to just try to re-energize the group. We wanted to really work on our work plan for not only the upcoming year, but like the next 1 to 3 years. And it was kind of overall, everyone was in agreement that our past work plans were just too big. There was too much there. You know, this is a group of people that are just volunteering their time, essentially. And so there weren't very many things getting done and getting checked off the list. And so what we really wanted to focus in on this work plan is a few, just a few things, like high priorities that we thought would really make a difference. Get those done, do them well, instead of just trying to bite off more than we can chew. So we wanted to identify those highest priorities. So what we did, and that was kind of why I wanted to share with you, we looked over those flyway social science needs. We looked over the joint venture needs from a previous assessment. And then we also looked at those people recommendations from the plan update. And that kind of guided that conversation. We then came up with, you know, a lot of different ideas on actions that we could take. And then we started a prioritization process looking at where, though, we kind of put them on a grid of impact. So low impact, high impact, and then ease of completion, kind of that easy to hard. And now we're looking at those different quadrants and really honing in on the prioritization there. And so then we want to finish this work plan this fall. We've got a meeting coming up in October, and I think we're going to meet again in November to finish this off. But making sure we have those focus areas correct. And then another key thing here is revisiting our membership of HD Pet, and given kind of perhaps some new directions here, maybe some new focus areas, making sure we've got the right people at the table. And then, oh, this was the last slide here. This was just a reminder to everybody that I'd still like to have another Mississippi Flyway representative on HD Pet. Now that I'm chairing that group, it would be good to have another Flyway representative there. So if anybody's interested, just give me a shout. Any questions?
Barb, how long will you be chair of the group?
I think it's until I go someplace else, or until somebody decides I'm not doing a very good job.
Okay. Questions or discussion for Barb? All right. Well, thank you, Barb.
Yep, thank you.
We'll keep moving along to Saskatchewan. Proposed changes to non-resident game bird hunting opportunities. Catherine, are you able to take it away?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Aaron. Quick question. Has everyone in the group seen the letter yet, or should I kind of go through that a little bit?
I did not forward the letter yet, Catherine.
No, don't
I
worry.
Would be better to come from you.
Sure. No, that sounds great. Well, so just kind of wanted to give some folks a heads up on some of the things that have been happening in Saskatchewan lately. Probably a little bit not a surprise considering the recent changes in Manitoba to game bird hunting opportunities. And if you look west, same thing in Alberta. So to give a little bit of a history, on this. The letter I was talking about to Oren is a letter that we've sent out both internal to our Saskatchewan Wildlife Advisory Committee stakeholder groups, as well as both flyway waterfall groups, and we've sent it to the Prairie Waterfall Technical Committee, which is sort of our Canadian provincial federal collaboration. We've sent it to NAWAMP representatives, Ducks Unlimited Canada, Delta. We tried to send this to the people who may be affected and the people who may have some perspective on implications of proposed changes. We aren't really asking if people are supportive or not, but we are really asking for people's perspectives on what implications might be, positive or negative, so that we can ensure as we're going ahead, as I go and brief my minister, the decision maker, on this topic, that we've covered all the possible elements that may be in play here. So the letter is pretty simple. It's regarding the potential to move from a currently fully open, regular, non-resident game bird hunting license to a term license. The length of the term and whether there would only be one or multiple terms available for hunters is still under consideration. Still up for a lot of discussion on this item, but that's basically what the letter is about. So I'll back up a little bit and tell you sort of what led us here. The outfitting groups in the three prairie provinces have been very well coordinated, and they have been lobbying the government around their concerns around illegal outfitting. Their perspective is that a lot of freelance non-resident hunters are coming into the provinces, and they are guiding illegally, taking revenue away from the legitimate outfitting businesses, and obviously, you don't want illegal activity occurring. So this is an ongoing issue, has been for years. Our outfitter group got far more coordinated about 5 years ago. And part of the reason for that is that we had made a move to try actually institutionalize the outfitting agency as sort of an arm's length from government agency that would essentially be funded to run outfitting in the province. That didn't quite happen. It was supposed to be mandatory membership, and it kind of fell apart politically, but they did become a stronger agency. Over this time, they've really focused on freelance game bird hunters, and we've had our enforcement staff focus on illegal outfitting the last few years to try get a sense of what's happening on the ground. In reality, there is illegal outfitting happening in our province. There certainly is. We haven't noticed an increase, and the scopes seems to be somewhat limited, but it's occurring. Most hunters that are being checked seem to be doing so lawfully. That said, it's illegal activity, so it's really hard to quantify. But they continue to lobby. So we were asked to look at options to curb illegal outfitting. There's some key principles. We view waterfowl management as cooperative along or around North America. So we're all partners in this. We definitely, as a province, benefit from the tourism to our province. We're a premier destination. Game bird hunting is one of the biggest drivers of tourism in rural Saskatchewan. And it's not only from that perspective, but it's also through the fall flights programming. We get a lot of funding to our province for wetland management. In a province that otherwise there's a lot of pressure to drain wetlands. We're the only province without some sort of policy currently around wetland drainage, and there is efforts underway by our water security agency to correct that, but it is it's called the Agricultural Water Stewardship Policy. So I will let you read between the lines on where the slant is on that one. So that's drafted. They are in the process of engaging on that. And then really another key piece that we had sort of in the back of our minds as we were looking at potential options is not wanting to unduly impact law-abiding people, right? You don't want to bring the hammer down on all these people who are doing things lawfully to catch a few that aren't. Not only hunters directly, but the residents and the businesses that rely on them, whether it's from a financial standpoint or just the friendships that have been made across the province. So those were some of the key principles that were kind of in our minds as we looked at options. And so a term license is sort of where we landed as a potential avenue. Will it curb all illegal outfitting? Absolutely not. Could it have some implication in curbing some of the egregious illegal outfitting? Perhaps. That's been met with mixed results in other jurisdictions, but it's not something we've ever tried. I guess alongside all of this conversation and talking about the drainage policy or wetland policy, Water Security Agency several years back had looked for some funding to conduct some human dimensions research on waterfowl hunters in Saskatchewan. And their reasoning for this was to look at the value of wetlands from a different angle, not just the agricultural angle. This was in the early days of their wetland policy development. And it worked out really well for us because it happened to coincide with just as Manitoba was making changes. So changes were happening elsewhere. We were getting additional pressure to make changes, and it was an opportunity to get some information about the current state of waterfowl hunting in our province. So the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Mark Vachuska and his group there were contracted to do the research. They sent it out to 2,000 residents, 2,000 non-residents, and 2,000 Canadian residents. So those three groups, and we got about a 30% response rate. It was pretty decent. And it was really informative on what's happening on the ground. How long are people staying? What kind of hunt are they looking for? Are they outfitted? Are they not? What elements of the hunt do they enjoy? What would be their interest in returning if they were a visiting hunter? If certain changes were made, what was their financial contributions? Where were they located in the geography of Saskatchewan? So there's a whole lot. If you're interested, it is posted on the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's website. I'm happy to provide a link. There's, you can peruse 150 some pages of graphs. It's great. That was really helpful to Barb, to go back to some of the stuff you were talking about. It was really informative as we were starting to think about potential changes on what that might look like. So one of the key elements we found is the vast majority, like 90%, 89% of hunters that responded are staying less than 10 days in our province. So we kind of get a frame. Most people are staying a short period of time. Only about 2% are staying more than 20 days. Big financial implications for visiting hunters coming to our province. And you couple that with our enforcement efforts that most people are lawfully hunting, that gave us a frame of reference to work from. So as I said, the proposal right now is simply to explore the potential for a term license. We've sent this letter out, and Oren, we can go ahead and share that with everybody so they can see the specifics. But the term hasn't been decided. We are certainly getting pressure for a week single term from the outfitting agencies. We are getting the exact opposite pressure from some of the conservation agencies to make absolutely no changes. With the Manitoba changes, I think we heard that people wanted to be involved a little bit more in any potential changes that might be happening along our flyways. And so we really wanted to at a bare minimum, let you know kind of what conversations are happening in Saskatchewan and what some of the thinking right now is and what are some of the things that we are looking at. I know Flyways won't comment from a support perspective or not, right? We tend to stay out of other jurisdictions' politics, but I would really benefit from any insight you have into the implications that a change like this might have. You know, should it be multi-term? Should it be single term? Should it be longer? Should it be shorter? All of that's on the table. You know, you guys will have had some experiences that we won't have. So I really want to learn from that. And my role right now is I'm compiling all of the responses that I'm getting. You know, I'm briefing up to our minister pretty regularly on this one. I'm hoping I have captured most of the implications, positive and negative, to this point, but this is the litmus test. We're trying to go far and wide with this and make sure that we haven't missed anything so that our decision makers can make an evidence-informed decision, whichever way it goes. So there's the long-winded version, Oren.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. I'm sure this is a very challenging topic for you in particular to handle. I, for one, appreciate the communication. I apologize. I did not distribute the letter. I kind of lost track of it, and I figured it was a sensitive subject. I didn't want to distribute it widely unless that was clear that was appropriate. So I will now do so. I'll forward this to all of our members. It sounds like what you're asking for is for us to read it and understand what Saskatchewan is communicating. And if we have any feedback, we direct that to you, maybe informally through a email to you. Is that the appropriate format?
Yes. So I will take feedback in any way it comes. Informally to me, absolutely, that works. If the Flyway generally wanted to have a formal response, that would be fine too. You know, it doesn't hurt for our minister to see formal responses as well. So we'll take everything we can get at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, does anyone have any questions or comments or discussion for Catherine at this point? Like Barb's got her hand up.
Yeah, Catherine, thanks for that, all that information. So at the risk of sounding like super naive, can you explain to me, like, what is that justification from getting from like the illegal outfitters? Like, how does a term license, a non-resident term license, help that? I guess I'm just kind of missing like something big there.
No, not at all. It's a bit of a stretch. So really the thought process being that illegal outfitters are coming up and they're taking clients and they're rotating through. So as they're out in the field with their friends is typically the situation that we see in the true illegal outfitting cases. And so by limiting the amount of time that the outfitter could actually be up here, they wouldn't have the same availability to just continue on. Same thing with their guides. Is that going to prevent people from rotating out outfitters or guides to accommodate? Probably not. The thought around perhaps doing a multi-term as opposed to a single term, maybe I will give you my personal preference on that. But you know, the hope is that we may be able to look, coupled with our hunter harvest survey, we may be able to look at general areas where there may be people staying for longer periods of time and kind of direct some enforcement action. Alberta did try that. They didn't find that buying multi-terms was a great proxy for illegal activity per se. So I don't think it's going to be as simple as just, yeah, oh, this person's bought 2 or 3 terms. They must be doing shady activities, as much as knowing geographically where our enforcement agencies will tend to focus in certain regions of the province around illegal activity. And so that might be able to narrow down where in the province. We can probably do that anyway with the staging of waterfowl in our province too.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey, Catherine, a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, shoot.
It's my understanding that non-residents can own an outfitting license. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah, and it's anecdotal, but there has been a lot of resident businesses being sold to out of province outfits. They do have to have a headquarters in Saskatchewan. One of the key pieces to this is that we have a moratorium on outfitting licenses in our province right now. So if you wanted to become an outfitter in Saskatchewan right now, you couldn't just give us a call and we'd give you a license. You'd have to buy a business from an existing outfitter. So there's about 230 game bird outfitters in the province. One of the things that we have discussed, but was very poorly received by the outfitting agency, is whether we should open that up and consider having additional opportunities, legitimize some of these businesses. Yeah, probably for obvious reasons that wasn't favorably received, and they were very adamantly opposed.
Yeah, that's what I really struggle with as well, is this is an example of private industry trying to capitalize and monetize and corner a public resource.
Yep. Well, and I don't know about other jurisdictions, but we have something in our province called our game allocation framework. And it's a compendium document to our game management plan, which at a broad level outlines how we will manage game species in the province. And the game allocation framework digs in a little bit into how we allocate a resource among competing interests. And we do actually talk about the priorities. I think most jurisdictions have something similar. So conservation obviously being the top priority. There's got to be enough critters before you ever are going to hunt them. And then in Canada, in Saskatchewan, Indigenous harvesters who have rights would have the second priority. So we're not going to offer the licensed hunting opportunities until their needs are met. The next priority would be Saskatchewan residents, and then outfitters got themselves put in there before non-residents, but that's kind of our allocation priority. And it's not that one group should ever have veto vote over the next group, so much as it was viewed as if we had to cut back, we would start at the bottom and work up. So I think most jurisdictions have something similar. Ours is a little bit more formalized. But yeah, there's that piece. Now, the key part of that is that it's supposed to be related to the resource. So we're not dealing with a limited resource here. Certainly in Saskatchewan, there's more than enough bird hunting opportunity to go around. What is a limited resource of recent is land access. We have changed our trespass laws in the last few years to emulate more like most jurisdictions that require permission. Unless posted that you can go on. We used to be a province where you could go anywhere unless it was posted no trespass. So that has been an issue for resident hunters finding land access. There's certainly some illegal paid under the table. We don't allow people to pay for hunting opportunities or a land access, which is a little bit different than I think south of the border. So there is some of that going on for sure. Outfitters are tying up large tracts of land. It's so that is the limited resource that people are finding. It's not so much the birds. And so as much as I'd love to leave the game allocation framework to the birds, that is a challenge I've faced.
Can outfitters pay to lease the hunting rights?
No.
No. So the landowners are not supposed to financially benefit.
No, but that does happen fairly regularly. Hard to prove, right? So enforcement certainly has its challenges set out for it. We do see, like, I'll go to an outfitting convention, the game bird sector, and they'll talk about how they secure access, not always above board, the same way that, a local hunter might, bottle of whiskey under the table. Some landowners simply give over land permissions to the local outfitter so they don't have to deal with it. Or a local friend. So there's a lot going on, but yeah, landowners can't benefit from hunter access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully, last question for me on this, and I have to admit, I have a personal interest here.
That's fair.
It seems like what are there trends in non-resident hunting license sales in Saskatchewan? Are more people going to Saskatchewan? Has that changed since the changes in Manitoba?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. So pre-COVID, it was increasing substantially. Like every year we were getting an increase. COVID hit. So we were up to about 12,000 non-resident hunters entering our province. To give some context for that, there's about 2,000 Canadian residents and 20,000 Saskatchewan residents. That would be sort of your ballpark. It's about 35,000 people hunting game birds in the province. COVID hit. We dropped, the borders were closed. The only people who could be hunting, there was 40 of them who could be here for legitimate other reasons, and they grabbed a hunt in. We didn't prevent them from buying a license. It increased, continued to come back. We were at, I think we were about 10,000 hunters last year. So when the Manitoba changes happened, and Julian can correct me, or Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Manitoba gets about 3,000 non-resident hunters a year. We still had room to encompass all of the hunters. If every non-resident hunter in Manitoba had said, screw it, we're coming to Saskatchewan, we still wouldn't have hit our pre-COVID numbers. We'd have come close, but we still wouldn't have hit it. That didn't happen. We had a little bit of an increase, but I understand Manitoba didn't have any decrease. So I don't think there was a shift. Frank, am I correct in that? Or Jillian?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but I'm not too sure if Jillian is familiar. I think the draw was pretty much like, I think everybody got a license, correct, Jillian?
Yeah, I think so. I'll admit I don't know too much, at least during the COVID time, since I wasn't in the position then, but I think it was all fine. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have the numbers myself either.
Not a worry. It was somewhere around there, and only because I took a very active interest in your guys' numbers because of concerns that we were being raised, that we were going to get this mass influx of non-residents who typically hunted in Manitoba coming over to Saskatchewan. For a variety of reasons, didn't seem to be realized.
Definitely, just one of the big differences in Manitoba with their legislation was that the outfitters had a lot of pain also. So it wasn't necessarily pushed by outfitters in Manitoba because they ended up being limited in their clients also. So their allocation was based on what they had taken for hunters in like 2 non-COVID years prior that were part of their declaration. And then the province capped the number of outfitted clients so that basically the outfitters can't grow their business unless they pull licenses from other outfitters, buy businesses, whatever. So I would say like the outfitters are not too happy in Manitoba. They've dealt with a lot of pain also. And so the motivations are a little bit different between, a lot of the changes in Manitoba were driven by like resident hunters, Manitoba Wildlife Federation. And then also in Manitoba, the only way that non-Canadians can own outfitting businesses is if it's worth, I think it's, what is Jillian, like 350,000 worth of assets. So you have to have like a lodge basically. Like you can't just, say you have an office or something, like you actually have to have assets associated with your business. So most of the outfitters in Manitoba are residents. So that's a big difference with Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get into, that's my old job. So sorry, Jillian. I just threw you weren't around then.
All good. I'm new in the position, so I don't know everything.
All good. I'm not new, and I'm still learning. So, yeah. So to go back to your question, Oren, I think we were around 11,000 non-resident hunters last year. have to go back and look, but so we're kind of getting 10,000, 11,000. Like we're kind of getting up there again, but it's been pretty steady if you take out the COVID parts of it.
And what year did the trespass laws change?
Ooh, it was 2022.
Yeah, pretty recent.
Yeah, so it actually worked out really nicely again for our human dimensions work because the survey went out this spring, like February, I think, of 2023. And so they had just gone through their first season of an access change. The proposal was actually pre-COVID, but it took several years to get through the legislature and actually become implemented. And that was driven more by rural crime than anything, but yeah.
And then just also you got the pressures on the other side now too with Alberta and Alberta's term license changes too. So yeah, you guys are feeling the squeeze from both sides.
Yes, I'm getting a lot of very verbose letters right now. It's really it's fascinating if I can ramble on it a little. It's you get the standard responses from the people you think you're going to get, but I had one yesterday and it's like it's a tomb from a resident who is very opposed to the non-resident, the potential to limit non-residents, and his perspective is very anti-outfitting. He's not bothered by non-residents. He doesn't want it to change because of outfitting pressure. Yeah, I had one guy send me a missive that I'm pretty sure is an illegal outfitter, asking for more enforcement on illegal outfitting. So it's been a mixed bag.
Sounds pretty challenging, but I really appreciate you communicating with us. I apologize for dropping the ball on the letter. I will send that out today.
Yeah, no worries. And if you end up having questions, give me a shout anytime. We're about to, the writ is going to drop for an election here next week for me, but this is all standard business now that I've been able to kind of walk you guys through it. So reach out anytime. I'm always happy to chat more about it. And if you have any comments, would love to have them. So, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Catherine.
You bet.
All right. Last agenda item, I believe, are just some miscellaneous items that I have to follow up with folks. The first regards our next virtual meeting in October, which I think would be October 16. And Dave Scott made John and I aware that could potentially conflict with the SRC meeting. So just wanted to float this by to see if people felt like we should change the meeting date in relation to the SRC meeting, and Dave, I think earlier you mentioned October 15. So as that date's being honed, I'm just looking for discussion. Do people want to change the meeting, next month's meeting date, or continue, or where are we at with this? I'm just looking for discussion here.
My best guess though, Orin, is that it'll be on the 15th and it'll be a one-day meeting.
So
Obviously not guaranteed, but if that pans out, then meeting on the afternoon Wednesday should be fine.
Yeah, that would be great. You could update anybody who's not able to watch it on those discussions. Okay, so any feedback on next month's meeting date and time? Does people want to leave it the same or change?
My personal take is we have a day. Stick with it unless if the SRC had been planned for that day, then maybe we move it, but otherwise let's leave it.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with it. Unless we absolutely have a direct conflict, sounds like it actually might work out okay to hear an update the day after, once the dust settles. Okay, so we'll plan to have our virtual meeting afternoon of October 16. Next item is the two-tier webinar. I saw a few familiar names on the webinar yesterday, but for those who didn't catch it, there were some interesting developments. And for those that did attend, please feel free to jump in on this discussion here. There were two take-home messages from the webinar yesterday. One, South Dakota and Nebraska have indicated that harvest under the two-tier license system, it doesn't seem to be any different than harvest under a tier 1 license. And for those who aren't familiar, remember a tier 1 license is your standard license up to 6 ducks with all the species restrictions. A tier 2 license is a daily bag limit of 3 ducks, but those can be any species. So this is the 4th year of experimental implementation in both Nebraska and South Dakota. They've been sharing those results. And the second big development yesterday was that they were requesting feedback from other flyways and or gauging interest from other flyways and state agencies. I wasn't really expecting that, and certainly not in that format. Kind of at a loss as to how to respond, even at the level of my state agency. I've talked about it a little bit with Adam and with John, and we really feel like we need more time for this to play out. But I suspect this will be a discussion topic at the October SRC, hopefully at the December Human Harvest Management Working Group, and then perhaps this is something that we'll need to begin talking about at our February meeting. So I'll pause there and ask anybody else that watched the webinar to share your thoughts and summaries.
Oren, I don't know if you said, like Ben appeared in my office this morning, and as counsel, he had been asked to participate in a survey or some kind of post thing on this. Have other council folks been hit with asking to participate? He's like, I didn't even know this existed. What is this? So,
well, my impression, I don't know exactly what Ben received, but I received a survey link that asked me to give my name and what flyway I represent. And I stopped the survey at that point because I did not feel like I was ready to represent a flyway, much less my state agency on the survey. And apparently that was how they indicated they were going to measure interest from other flyways in other states. And so I didn't.
I can fill you, Oren, I can fill you in. The survey was sent out to both the council members and the tech section members for all 4 flyways. Both me and my council rep received it. It's the same survey for both. It's asking a question. It asks the questions: what's your name, your email address? I took the whole survey. It asks what flyway you're in, what state you represent, are you the council or tech section member, and then it asks, are you interested in would you be interested in participating in a 2-tier system in the future? And basically, there's like 4 different answers you can provide. You're not interested. You may be interested, but you need more information. You may be interested, but you have some species that you're concerned about. And I don't recall what the 4th one was, but it was a series of maybe 2 or 3 questions after answering that, the state geographic questions. So I took the whole thing.
Okay, thank you, Seth. I stopped. I didn't take it. I don't know that I will take it. Barb, I think I saw that you were on the webinar. What were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway was, well, I also was very surprised that was kind of an ask of this webinar was, our state's interested. I really thought that was a very premature question, but and like not the right people there to answer. But when Ken Richgis talked, like he kind of, talked right at the end there, and my takeaway there was like he just threw a wet blanket on the whole thing. Like after Ken's comments, I was like, this isn't going to go anywhere. Because so Ken, for those of you that weren't there, Ken's comments were, he commended Nebraska and South Dakota for doing all this work, but that how would it integrate with, the work that they already do for all of the harvest models. And he tied it back to like the AHM task force and wanting a discussion to happen there about like more holistically how to approach duck management in the country, and that could be like maybe one piece of it, but they didn't want to really focus on that. And he was it was kind of the standard message, completely non-committal, that any of the service time would be spent kind of working on this. So that, like I said, that was my takeaway. Is I thought it was really interesting. And then when Ken kind of wrapped it up that way, I thought, wow, that was really a wet blanket he just threw on the whole thing.
And he was nice.
Oh yeah, he was very nice about it.
Yeah, we were told we would have an opportunity to provide the service perspective, and we were happy that Ken was there to do that. But I think, in a nutshell, the bottom line is we don't have a position until we see the final report to see if you accomplish the metrics related to R3 that were put forward as the purpose behind this. And then Ken went through a number of other, issues that you just mentioned, some of them, Barb, that would need to be resolved if we were to move this forward. And so it is a framework issue, not a special season. But given that there's an AHM task force and, kind of the rethinking of waterfowl management, what are our goals, where are we going, it fits more into that larger conversation. So that's why Ken was there, gave an opportunity for provide a service perspective. And I didn't know they were going to do that survey till yesterday. Didn't see it, but I think they're reacting a little bit to comments they heard from SRC in the spring to, they want to be able to report back to SRC that, here's the interest level that we gauge if this should move forward. So I think it's premature, like you said, to really make any definitive statement until they finish the 4th year and they give us a report.
I kind of messed up one of the takeaways. So the second takeaway was that they feel like it is helping them recruit hunters. And they put some numbers on that. It was 1,000 to 1,500 hunters in each of the states. So that was how they finished it. They finished it on a very upbeat note, indicating it helps R3. And then, as Barb and Dave just described, Ken Rich just provided a services perspective. And then it was, we're going to send out this survey to gauge interest. So I had not been paying very close attention to this subject, but it seems like we may need to have these discussions in the near future. So I just wanted to make everybody aware where that stood, and if you got questions like John apparently did, where it was coming from. Does anybody else have anything to add, or any discussion items, questions, etc.? Okay, so then hearing none, I think how we'll handle this is see what plays out at the October SRC meeting, and then allow the Harvest Management Working Group to discuss whatever they need to. And if we perhaps we'll have an opportunity or a reason to discuss this further in February. And at that time, we can provide agency perspectives and begin thinking about a flyway perspective on this issue. Does that sound acceptable to everyone? Okay. All right. So really quickly, I did see the recommendations from the other 3 flyways, and I just wanted to update you on a couple items of interest. In terms of zones and splits, what I have seen is that the Central Flyway did approve a recommendation to add a additional options for zones and splits. So let me see if I can pull that up here. And Nate, if you're on and familiar with how this all shook out, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm here. I believe they approved pretty much exactly what we had done. I don't remember seeing, I haven't seen the actual recommendation itself. But Tom had indicated that they were moving it forward.
Okay. But it looks like it doesn't include the non-contiguous zones. So it looks like they recommended 4 zones with 2 season segments, so 1 split, or 3 zones with 3 season segments, but not the contiguous or non-contiguous, zone option.
Okay.
But as far as I can tell, that's the Central Flyway is the only flyway that approved any additional options for zones and splits. Is that your understanding as well, Nate?
Correct. Yeah. There was no traction in either of the 2 coastal flyways.
Okay. All right. And Dave's confirming there. So that's how the zones and splits shook out. I guess the only other recommendation I thought would be of interest to our group is the Atlantic Flyway did elect to write a letter of support requesting additional funding for the BBL and for the USGS BBS, the bird banding, or the breeding bird survey, excuse me. So that was interesting.
Oren,
Go ahead, Dave.
and I think that was a late development, and Tony went to their meeting.
Okay.
So we had heard a little bit of that internally from Ken recently, but Tony actually went there and provided that information, which they did not provide to the other flyways. So nobody else really had a chance to react to that. And I do think if you have conversations or, email with Tony, he'll probably provide the details, but they are definitely looking for, partner support. So that's because he was at that meeting. I think that's why they reacted that way.
So the question that comes to my mind is, do we want to do something similar, and or should we do that remotely prior to our February meeting?
I think you could reach out to Tony and say you're aware of the Atlantic Flyway recommendation, and would he like to provide you with more details or join on a monthly call? Is it something that needs to be addressed, more urgently, or can it wait? I don't want to speak for them because, we didn't hear from it.
Okay. Well, I can certainly follow up and see if there would be benefit to us engaging on that subject. All right, so any questions, discussion on recommendations from other flyways? All right, hearing none, the last item I would have is the treasurer's report. Wes sent out a draft of the treasurer's report yesterday. I'm looking to gauge interest. Do people feel comfortable approving that now, or do they want more time? We could either approve it on this call now and just take care of it, or we could approve it via email, which would allow more time for people to review. So please indicate, tech reps, please indicate one way or the other whether you want to take care of it now or at a later date.
Or if anybody did not see the email I sent roughly an hour before our call started, I can bring it up and point out the changes that were sent.
Yeah, would you just run us through the treasurer's report and hit the highlights, please, Wes?
Yep. In just a second.
And remember, everyone, this is for the tech section. This is just the account that's shared between us and MBTS that's driven by meeting registration. This is not the council treasury.
All right, is everybody seeing?
Yep, we're seeing the Word doc. It's on 2 screens, which is okay for me, but if anybody needs it blown up, we certainly can.
How's that?
Oh, now it's down to 1. You might as well keep blowing it up. Yep, that looks pretty good there, Wes.
Say when.
I'd stop now. Yep, you can scroll down a little bit. We should get just about everything.
All right, so the first amendment that was sent was this first sentence, or second sentence rather, adding Doug McLean and Ben Williams. They are now listed on the Wells Fargo account. Prior to the summer meeting, it was Orrin, David, and myself. I neglected to stick them in before I sent that on. And then also I broke out the meeting supplies versus hospitality room supplies and wiffle ball supplies in the second paragraph to show exactly how much was spent. Orrin pointed out that it was very helpful to states that were hosting to see specifically how much a hospitality room costs, as Illinois is not allowed to accept donations. And so basically the tech section had to foot the bill for all of it. And so that will help with meeting planning as you move forward. And then again, in the last line, I pointed out the meeting room cost versus the cost of the actual hospitality room. And then the last sentence there broke down the total supplies that are itemized higher than that. Anything else, we did make roughly $4,000 off the meeting, which was needed. The winter meeting rather cost us a little bit of money, so we're pretty much getting back to even there. And then the rest is just a breakdown. The first page there was the intake, and then here's the breakdown of what we spent.
Well, it looks good to me. Great, nice work, Wes, and great job, Illinois. Excellent meeting. Nice to come out in the black. Does anybody have any questions for Wes? Okay, well, hearing none, the little bit of feedback I'm seeing is that let's just go ahead and approve this now. So I'd accept a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Michigan second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. All right. The treasurer's report is approved. That concludes the items that I had and concludes our agenda. Is there any last minute items or discussion anybody would like to have?
Orrin, I'll just kind of quickly go over what we were talking about for next meeting.
Oh, great. Good idea. Please do.
So on there, I have an Iowa project that Taylor Ballard's going to do for us from Iowa. Barb, I'm going to probably keep you off the HD topic for this time. I'm going to probably skip you this time because we got a bunch of other things to do. Wetland reviews in the Mississippi Flyway, Mike Irwin and Habitat Committee talk about a little bit about some wetland reviews that have been done in states and is something that we could do in the future. I had Paul Link for a wrap up of the banding season as it took place up in North and South Dakota. Ariel is going to give us a presentation on King Rails. I had treasurer's report on there but we can obviously scratch that, I think, at this point. And then lastly, we'll have a HIP discussion with Brad Bortner and Kathy Fleming. And then not lastly, and then maybe a final wrap up with the SRC, what happened with the SRC the day before. So if anybody thinks of anything there, Barb, if you feel compelled to put HD topic in there, I'll be happy to. But for now, I'm probably going to take it out unless you really want to.
I would ask, when we were in Galena, I showed you the HIP and the data book and gave you the links.
Uh-huh.
And I would like to remind folks that, take an opportunity to review that and see if you have any feedback that I can pass along. That would be helpful.
Dave, are you asking for that as an agenda item in October?
Or just a reminder, because sometime soon I'd like to know that you guys, took some time, went through that, you're good with it, you don't see anything missing, or there's something that needs to be cleaned up. But just having some dedicated review time from the tech section would be good. And then any related feedback.
Yeah, let's put that as an item just so we have a deadline. Has everybody received that?
I'm sure you all saw it at the tech section and you got busy.
Yeah, and you sent it during our flyway meeting, didn't you, Dave?
Yep.
And was that to just the US tech reps, or all the tech reps, or all the GBTS? What was the distribution list?
I think I sent it to the US Gainberg tech reps during the meeting. And if you want to, forward it out to the group as a reminder and just ask them to take a little time to look through that and provide any feedback at the next meeting, or contact me directly if you have something, that's fine.
Okay. Yep. Be good to send out a reminder on that. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
JB, what was that first October meeting topic?
A project, Warren, you want to tell us what a project in Iowa that Taylor Ballard is doing? I've just got topics. I don't have exactly all the details of these things yet.
That's fine. I just missed the name. That's fine.
Yep. So Taylor Ballard out of our shop is going to present on how we're using our migration survey to evaluate the timing of our hunting season dates. Okay, well, that's all I have on my list. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Seth or Houston, are you guys asleep?
Michigan.
Michigan, second.
Alabama, seconds.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll conclude. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.